Hello, Lake Forest. This is former Mayor George Pandaleon, and you are listening to the Lake Forest Podcast.
The Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course, Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters: Matt A., Elizabeth C., Costa, Lance, Otto, RDM, John C., and Helen. Shout out to the Lake Forest Breakfast Group, Broad Stop and Captain Mike's in Kenosha, the Greentown Tavern, and the Frolic Lounge in Waukegan.
MG a lot.
I was telling all the boys, boy, it sure is chilly in Lake Forest today, because I think hell done froze over. We got George on the show. Welcome aboard, Mayor George.
Thank you. Fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thanks so much. Great honor to have you on.
Good morning. We're glad to have you. Yes.
Yes. Well, it's
Looking
early.
forward to it.
Well, it's early in the show, George. You know that.
Things can go wrong, and usually do.
So George, the 4 years you spent as mayor of Lake Forest, if you had to rank the top three mayors in the whatever gazillion year history of Lake Forest, do you think you've had the most challenging term ever?
There have been a lot of mayors that have had serious challenges. Some of them were constructive challenges. Some of them were difficult challenges. I remember I was the chairman of the Plan Commission when Howard Kerr was the mayor. There were a large number of challenges then. But nobody expected something like COVID. And I don't think anybody ever expected something like what happened at Highland Park last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
so those were difficult. And then, but on the other hand, when I started out, and the caucus asked me what my big objectives were, people asked me what the objectives were for my term. There were basically three. There was, let's make sure we have a smooth transition. We had a lot of new people. We had a new city manager, a new city attorney, several new people on the city council. Let's keep everything together on that front. Let's see if there's something we can do to encourage our real estate market to improve. And because it had been moribund for at least a decade.
Yes.
And the third thing was, let's try to get some vibrancy into our CBD. There were a lot of complaints about it just being quiet and not active and no vibrancy and no street kind of activity. Mm-hmm. And so those were the three big things that I was focused on when I became mayor. And it's an ill wind that blows no one good. I mean, COVID really helped us on actually the transition helped too. It helped on the transition too, because it gave the new city manager an opportunity to implement a lot of things much more quickly than would have been possible without COVID. But it was very challenging trying to make sure that our fire department, our police department, our public works department, our garbage collection, if COVID had run through those departments and people had been out for 2 weeks, in large numbers, that could have been a serious challenge. So there was a lot of work done to make sure that those basic functions were able to continue. And we had very little incidence of COVID in the city staffs.
There was an amazing amount of change in the real estate market during COVID, which was not anticipated at the beginning of the crisis. How did that really impact Lake Forest?
Well, people started asking me, why do people come to why are all these people moving to Lake Forest all of a sudden? And I think it had a lot to do with timing. And I think it had a lot to do with reducing the pain of the commute. The thing that had always been the rap on Lake Forest was that we were too far from the city and nobody wanted to come up here. Well, the fact is the people that would come here weren't going anywhere. They were staying in the city. They were maybe moving to Wilmette or Winnetka a little more frequently, but not really. With work from home opportunities, all of a sudden, and then on top of that, the constraints of living in the city under COVID and the violence, people were asking me, why are all these people moving up here? And I said, well, we have the 4 S's. We have schools, we have safety, we have space, and we have savings. I mean, our low tax rate was a big attraction for these people. And they could sell a $1.5 million, $2 million condo in Lincoln Park and get 3 or 4 times as much space and pay a lot less taxes and have a better quality of life without worrying about stranger danger and where their kids are all the time. So it really powered us. And I think once the word got out, people came up here and saw what our quality of life really is here. They were delighted, and they reported back to their friends. And in my neighborhood, I live in Whispering Oaks, right up the street from Cherokee School, and the typical new neighbor is a pregnant woman pushing a stroller. I mean, these kids aren't even in kindergarten yet. So it's been quite a shift. We have about 8,000 households in Lake Forest, and 1,500 of them or so are new residents. So that's a huge transition. And a lot of people like me, empty nesters, have had the opportunity after 10 years to finally downsize or relocate or do what they've wanted to do for a long time. So it's been a very positive thing for the city in that regard.
Yeah, we still have more housing coming into the city, believe it or not. There's still things being built, though I don't know how much longer that can continue.
Very low volume. I think the number last year was 30 units, out of 8,000 households. So I think we say there's something like 7,500 housing units or 8,000. It's right around the same number, but it's a very small number. We're pretty much fully built out. There'll be some infill. There'll be some teardowns. There'll be some multifamily in the downtown over time. So that's
George, trying to give you some more kudos here. 4 years in, 100-year pandemic, new city manager coming in. Okay, not to mention the boarding up of the windows in town and all that stuff. The BLM deal. That is quite the navigation that you did. So tip of the hat to you.
Now, on the boarding up for a moment, thing that happened there, the city never encouraged that. What happened was we have some national retailers who had been targeted in other markets and had corporate policy that if any kind of Black Lives Matter rally was happening in their vicinity, that they just pushed a button and the nationally hired contractor would come and board the place up. And then when the local people started to see that happening among the Lululemons and the Starbucks and the Williams Sonomas of the world, it became something everybody wanted to do. So it's too bad. But
I thought it was very unfortunate because it really kind of set the wrong message to everybody that we were somehow terrified of people, and we weren't. It was really, it looked bad. It was a bad optics.
Yep, absolutely. And
but you let them speak, or whoever let them speak, right?
Well, you can't stop people from speaking.
It wasn't a city sanctioned event. It was a classic case of First Amendment rights being protected by the community. This was put out on Facebook as something that was happening in Market Square, and they already had 600 people signed up to show up before the city even found out about it. So trying to shut that down would have definitely sent the wrong message and probably made us a target. So it was hard to explain that to people at the time. I got some rather
It
unpleasant.
ended up being a peaceful event, right? I mean, there
Oh,
was
yeah.
Absolutely. It was
problems.
delightful.
I think you even had like Representative Morgan speak at it, as I recall.
He did, and the mayor of Waukegan came down, and Leon Rockingham from North Chicago was there, and we had a great group of people.
I was there with my wife. It was very peaceful. It was it was actually kind of an inspirational event. It was a very nice thing.
Well, you still have the outliers that come in from Highland Park on either side, left or right. And there was a little shouting going on. But look, kudos. The way it was handled and all that, I would have loved to have told you this a while ago, but I couldn't. So thank you. So one of the first questions.
We did our best.
Okay. So one of the first questions I've always wanted to ask you is, can you explain in layman's terms, because you're definitely speaking to a layman here, the relationship between the mayor and the city manager and the guiding body of ICMA.org? Does that ring a bell?
The Community Managers Association.
Yeah.
Or City Managers Association. That's the City Managers Association. It's not something I was really directly involved with, except to accept some awards from them for some of the things we've done over the last 4 years. The way our structure, our government is structured very, very much like a corporate structure. The city staff and the senior staff are sort of the people who run the day-to-day operations. The city manager could be likened to the CEO. The director of finance could be likened to a CFO. So that's the C-suite, to use corporate terms. The city council sits as effectively the board of directors. So the board of directors is in a corporation is generally not involved in day-to-day decision-making, bill paying, selection of contractors, all that kind of thing. That's and strategy, frankly. I mean, corporate strategy is typically set by the C-suite and then brought to the city council or brought to the board of directors for approval and oversight. So the board of directors does what the board in Lake Forest does, or the city council does in Lake Forest, what the board of directors does in a corporation, which is allocate resources, allocate capital, point the management in directions that they believe are important to cover both operationally and also from a long-term capital point of view and strategically, and then oversee basically the CEO and thereby the senior staff. And essentially the city council has two employees, the city manager and the city attorney. So that city attorney is sort of like the general counsel. Mm-hmm. So, and then the mayor is really like the chairman of the board. So like in any corporation, the chairman of the board works very closely with the CEO, very closely with the CFO. I have a couple of friends who are chairman of major public company boards, and they were just regular board members for a number of years. And I remember asking one very close friend of mine, now what's it like to be the chairman of a major public corporation? Is it different than just being a board member? He said, you wouldn't believe how different it is. And I would say the exact same thing about going from alderman to city to mayor. It's an order of magnitude different level of responsibility, much more involvement in policy matters, but also in sensitive personnel matters, union relations, things that the city council on a day-to-day basis really isn't in a good position to manage because it's 8 people and it's hard to get 8 people to do, one thing. So the thing, what happens is, as with our boards and commissions, they get presented with proposals and they can say, we like that proposal or we don't like that proposal. They don't say, okay, we're going to go off by ourselves and create a whole new proposal. That's not what the board is supposed to do. That's not what the city council is supposed to do. Go back and do some more work on it and make it more acceptable to us, or take it in this other slightly different direction, but not writing it from scratch and not implementing it. So that it's very easy to understand if you sort of think of the corporation as the model.
So when people run for mayor and they say, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, as we saw a little bit in the last mayoral campaign. I mean, it's kind of they have the bully pulpit of the office, right? But
That's the biggest.
about it.
That's the biggest thing. You know, you got the mouthpiece. You are the representative of the city. Nobody else really speaks for the city the way the mayor does. So if the mayor sets the agenda, not without respect to the interests of the council and other actors in the city, but the mayor is the one who decides, you know, ultimately what's on the city council's agenda. So that's another leverage point. Yeah, that's a leverage point for sure. Although if you overuse it, you will lose it very quickly. You know, if you're not putting things on the agenda that should be on the agenda and that people believe should be on the agenda, you're gonna have a lot of opposition that's gonna rise up very quickly. So you have to be sensitive to what people are interested in talking about.
So this process has really taken a lot of the politics out of the day-to-day operations of city government, right? I mean, I don't know the history going back. I think it was in the 30s that this system was essentially started, and before that I guess the mayor just ran things or something like that.
Yeah, well, many city, we have what's called a council manager form of government. So we have a city council, and then the city manager reports to the city council. And then the rest of it works pretty much like I was saying before. That's a very tried and true model. It's used up and down the North Shore. It's used around Chicago. I think the difference here, one of the differences here versus a lot of the communities around us, is it's all volunteer. The only person who's getting paid is the mayor, and the mayor's getting a token amount of $10 a year. And that's just because there's a state law that says the mayors have to be compensated.
I hope you're adjusting to that loss of income there, George.
I'm working on it. I've given up my daily Starbucks, or my monthly Starbucks, I guess. I'm going to hometown now.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and that has been by the hometown, as well as Lake Colonial, as well as Sophia's Steak, have been tremendous additions to Lake Forest. And these came in during your time, and I got to really congratulate you for taking the town from being a bit of a restaurant desert to being a really top flight, great restaurant destination.
Well, it's interesting, as the people started to move up from the city, and as our residents, who were large clients of these places down in the city, stopped coming, the restaurants came to their clients, and that really, and those two, with two restaurant operators of that caliber, others have been attracted, and we've seen things like Hometown. We've seen the expansion of the Peanut Gallery. We've seen the two new restaurants open up out in Settlers Square. And we've had 10 new restaurants open. I think it's now up to 11.
Duffers
in the last 3 years.
Duffers Pub has been a tremendous
success. Duffers is another one, right?
As a fun place,
right.
As well as having the golf simulators there. What a great way to get people coming.
That's cool. That's very cool. Even though I embarrassed myself when I played, but
well, and that's the roll-up doors. The roll-up doors, the patio at Colonial, the patio outside Authentico. We haven't really had the weather for it yet. I suppose we have. I've been gone a couple of weeks during June when I hear the weather was quite nice, but it's going to be. And if we are successful, I shouldn't say we anymore. If the city is successful in attracting. There is a restaurant operator looking very closely at another site in Market Square. There's another restaurant operator that's working hard on the old mobile station across from the Deer Path.
Oh, please do something there.
That's one of my long-standing things. I know it's a very difficult situation that has to do with environmental issues and so forth, but it could easily be converted to a restaurant operation, and once some of these environmental issues are sorted out, and the operator who's looking at it has experience doing that in those kinds of facilities. So we got our fingers crossed for those two. But
George,
there's still more coming. There's still more coming.
This is a great segue into a hot topic that a lot of people are talking about, and understandably so. The CBD, the Central Business District, the redevelopment. The Plan Commission recently moved forward on a plan, a thumbnail, if you will, and stuff. And there was a little bit of debate, and understandable because people are concerned about change. But I know you've been very involved with this over the years and the various hats you've worn, as well as your business experience lends to this. So what's your take on redevelopment of the Central Business District and where you see it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Well, the redeveloping Market Square is off the table. I mean, that's, if anybody suggests that that's what's going on, they're just stirring the pot. We have a number of underutilized sites in our downtown, particularly along Deer Path and, south of Deer Path from basically Oakwood east to Western, and then at the north end of not at the north end of the downtown, but in the sort of the out what they're calling the inner circle, down to Wisconsin, around where hometown is. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of buildings in those quadrants or in those areas that are of low quality, and are not in good condition, and are not attractive. And so there's that. There's also there's the story of the banks in this town is a fascinating sort of tale. In around the early 2000s, late 90s, mostly early 2000s, we were being overrun by banks, and everybody was complaining about all the banks. And the banks had a lot of money. They wanted Lake Forest money, and they would do pretty much anything to get a branch office opened here. And we knew this wasn't going to last, but we thought, okay, and we can't really stop it as long as they're following our codes, which they were generally, but we can manage it. We can say, okay, you can't put a stock bank branch, a bank in a box branch on the corner. It's got to be a fungible building that can be used for something else after you're not there anymore. And you have to put in things like pocket parks and connectors and little pathways. And frankly, Hometown is in one of those buildings. I mean, that building is a perfect example of how those new rules that we put in place worked. That was the old Ferrari dealer, and it was a car dealership, a garage, and the owners followed the new rules that we had put in place and built it with the little patio and the little passageway and the drive-through, and it's really a lovely building. It has a bank in it. What do you know?
Is the 10% rule still in effect?
Yes, I believe somewhere along the way we narrowed the scope of it a little bit. We made it a little smaller area. That's kind of a vague recollection on my part, but it only covers really the core of the downtown area, and that was in response to an earlier wave of sort of non-retail uses. Yeah. So, and we applied the new special use permit rules that I was talking about a second ago to all those same businesses: real estate offices, brokerages, law firms. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's happening in retail right now is we're getting a lot of new kind of uses in shopping centers, more service uses. Like, what if a veterinarian wanted to open up in Market Square? Do we apply this 10% rule to that? We have. This isn't likely to happen in Market Square, but swimming pool, swimming facilities, private swimming facilities are a big new thing. Climbing gyms. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about that. So retail is constantly changing. The definition of retail changes. We just look at the sales tax. The city typically has just looked at, does it generate sales tax or does it not generate sales tax? And right. Then that's what we apply the 10% rule to.
So what does this play?
Retail is still lagging. I mean, we've had tremendous success with the restaurants. The banks are doing well. A lot of the other ones are doing well, but retail still seems to be a problem in downtown Lake Forest.
Well, there are a couple of vacancies that have been there for a while. They are all spoken for at one level or another. I I believe this is common knowledge, but the old J. Crew space is being taken over by another national high quality clothier, which will, I think, bring a whole new, they take it from this.
That would be helpful.
Retailer takes a different position than what we have in Market Square for now. The old Sweet Pete's, I call it the toy station space. I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
That is being carefully studied for potential restaurant use. So it's just, you have a very well capitalized, it's the Ohio State Teachers Pension Plan is the ultimate owner of Market Square. They're very sophisticated. They're holding out for the kinds of tenants they want. They want to really, to use a word I hate, they want to really curate the tenant roster in Market Square, and they're willing to take their time to do it. I know there was controversy when the bookstore relocated down the street, and that store sat there for a while, and then what? Lululemon. I mean, that's a massive improvement, and we still kept the bookstore. So I think, it's that kind of strategic thinking. It's taking time. They're very patient. They're very long-term owners, and I think it's going to work out well in the end. Going back to Joe's question, what's happening is we're systematically going through, or have been going through, the whole comprehensive plan, and I think we should probably change the name of it to conceptual plan as opposed to comprehensive plan. That's what it's always been called.
And
It's
CBD.
a conceptual plan. Well, and not just the CBD. We're looking at, we took a break during COVID, but we've looked at Route 60, the Route 60 component of it. We had a task force for that. We had a task force for Settlers Square area. And that work is done. Actually, Jack Reisenberg, former alderman, led the Route 60 task force. So it's an ongoing process. We're doing a complete review of the comprehensive plan sector by sector. The CBD is the sector that's being worked on right now. And but people forget, I think maybe conveniently, that the comprehensive plan is not our zoning code. That is not the rule book. It is the concept plan. These are private properties that are owned by private people who have private interests, and they can do what they want with their money. And so we can't dictate to them, what they build. They come to us, they make proposals, hopefully within our zoning code. And we say, okay, that works or that doesn't work with our zoning code. And here we jawbone back and forth with various boards and commissions to try to make the project the best it can be. And but that's all governed by our zoning code. And so changes to things like design parameters and that kind of thing, that's in the zoning code. So the process is we review the comprehensive plan, set long-term direction, and then, and I'm anticipating this will happen sort of block by block because of the way the comprehensive plan update to the CBD has been put together. And if you've read it, it is literally block by block. Setting some objectives for those blocks, and then the effort to detail those objectives into the zoning code will be, after it's reviewed by the city council, will be remanded back to the plan commission generally for recommendations for changes to the zoning code. And all that's going to happen in a whole long series of public meetings. So the notion that we should put all these parameters and details into a conceptual plan, it's just going to first of all, it's not what the plan is designed for. Second of all, it's going to bog down the process, which may be the intent, so that it makes it very difficult to build anything. And the problem is, again, they're private properties. If people are scared off from improving, replacing, enhancing, changing their properties, you're going to have the unintended consequence of preserving properties that aren't desirable to preserve. And I'm not going to name names, but we all know what the ones that are there. And then some other properties that are extremely underutilized, actually have some significant open space to them, mostly used for surface parking right now, are also point, something's going to happen to those over the next 10 years. The owners of those buildings are not using them. So we need to have objectives. You don't want to be in a position where you get blindsided by something and you don't have a plan, or because you're still arguing over it. So
one of the issues that have been discussed over the years with the central business district, and I've been a tenant in the central business district for 30 years, is to try to change the infrastructure to make it more pedestrian friendly. One of the problems that we have, and I will tell you, I know it sounds like a minor thing, snow removal. We don't have good. Lake Bluff has better snow removal than we do. I've got an office building, or I've tenanted an office building on Deer Path, and quite often it's difficult for my clients to be able to walk here in the wintertime because there's ice and snow all over the sidewalk. Not in front of my building. My landlord, Mr. Altunian, does a very good job with snow removal, but the Shell station next door does not. And because there is no unified removal of snow and ice, I think that the result is that it's difficult for pedestrians to get around in the winter here, and the winter here is a very long time.
Yeah, well, it's Chicago. Also it depends on how the snow falls and what time of the day it falls and what happens after the snow falls. But that's something, the details of how we have our CBD snow removal plan is something that should definitely be brought up. Go to the city council, go in public comment and say, hey, I think this is an area where we should make some improvements.
Yeah, because coming from Morton Grove, we had a similar challenge with redeveloping Dempster Street, and it would be a hodgepodge of landlords, and some shoveled the snow and some didn't. So when we created it was a TIFF, and we used some of the funds, we allocated that. Our public works department took, they got one of those sidewalk plows, and they take care of the sidewalk throughout the whole Dempster Street commercial area there. So that might be, obviously that costs money, right? And time.
We have all the equipment. I mean, we have all that equipment because we take care of the sidewalks all over town. In the CBD, it's technically, a property owner's responsibility, but when it affects others, maybe you change that around a little bit. I would raise that with with the current administration.
Yeah,
you're already deflecting.
Yeah,
I love it.
You go. Yeah, it's the new guy's problem. But weren't we also going to put some different paving on the across Deer Path to make the crossings of Deer Path more obvious to cars? I think this was a proposal at one point. To put in brick pavers and other ways of making pedestrian.
That's on its way. It's amazing how quickly we lose track of some of these things. But my recollection is we got a grant to do a lot of that work. The plan is already there. It's probably out on the city's website somewhere. It was just looking for funding. It was basically grant dependent. And we got a grant for I think it's a couple of $1 million to help fund that work. By the way, one of the things that has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and I give actually Jason and Elizabeth Holub, who's the finance director, a ton of credit for this. They have gotten extremely good at sourcing and obtaining grant money. We've had, and also working with other state institutions to get things done here that we don't have to directly pay for. So it's been millions and millions of dollars. I mean, the whole Deer Path and 41 project, which was about $12 million.
Oh my God, yeah.
That was an IDOT project. The city, we paid for it indirectly through our state taxes, but that's a project that's going to benefit this city for the next 75 years that we didn't have to pay a dime for in terms of direct expenditures. So
one of the other areas that people have been talking about with the CBD redevelopment and everything is parking, because if you're going to bring in all these businesses, you got to have a place for the customers and the workers to park. There's nights it gets to be a challenge parking for duffers because Jewel doesn't want people parking in their lot. So what's your take? Because I know there's a lot of discussion about parking garages and what the parking options are. What's your take on what should be done?
Well, I think I would sort of defer to the work of the comprehensive plan. It's in there. I've seen it. It's out there for anybody to look at. We already have a situation. I mean, the parking lot behind City Hall used to just have yawning vacancy all the time. Now it's never got any vacancies. And if we continue, if another restaurant comes into Market Square, if another restaurant goes over by the Deer Path and Francesca's there, and other things happen, further north and south, we're at a point now where it's tolerable, but it's not great. And you don't want to have lots of empty parking spaces. That's not a good look either. I mean, everybody likes to eat in a crowd. People like to shop in a crowd. There's nothing better looking to me as a person who has spent a lot of time in the retail real estate world. There's nothing better looking to me than a full parking lot. But it does affect convenience, and it can affect retailers and restaurants, businesses, if people are having a hard time parking. So, but there are ways to do it that are not offensive, and the demagoguing and the hyperbole that's been surrounded this question is really irresponsible. We have grade changes that are that make it very easy to put in basically a single-story parking structure that doesn't look like a parking structure, because you just go a half grade, you have half a level below grade, and that's your first level, and then the second level is just basically at grade.
Would you do that on the court a lot? Where do you think we could put something in like that?
Well, I think the lot behind City Hall is definitely a good candidate for that, because it slopes to the north. It slopes down as it goes north. So that's one. It's just, we're going to have to get creative. We had that issue in a big way over by the Deer Path where Francesca's is and Chase Bank years ago. And, that parking lot was, I was around for that. It was mildly controversial, but not terribly so once people saw what it was going to be. And it's full all the time. So obviously people are using it.
So we're not going to pave Paradise and put up a parking lot?
I think a 5-story parking structure probably is a good idea. Just I didn't really mean that.
And that was a spot.
Sarcasm flatters society viewers.
That was one of that space, that particular lot was also an environmental issue.
Yes. And it was delayed significantly. It was a former gas station, like the lot across, actually there were gas stations on 3 corners of that. When I moved here in '89, there were 3 gas stations on each of those 3 corners across from the Deer Path. Now there are none. There's a restaurant, a parking garage, and an empty gas station. So, but no, you're
right. That's been a successful, and I remember as well. I was on the Chamber of Commerce at the time, and there was some comment and some criticism of it, just for the idea of having a parking structure at all. But the truth is, it's perfectly attractive. It's not a bad spot at all by any standard.
And if you integrate it,
the same thing behind the City Hall, or on the Quarter lot, which is over at Wisconsin.
Right.
Either way would help relieve the parking issues. The problem with the lot behind the City Hall, though, is the Baptist Church.
Well, not that
could be worked around.
That's something you have to work around. Yeah.
No. They're not a problem. Let's be clear.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that we love.
They're great people.
We love the Baptist Church, and we've taken very good care of it over the years. The comprehensive plan report that's available on the website is very clear about parking, that it is to be concealed. It is to be built inside the envelope of buildings. It is to be not a prominent feature on the street. And to the extent that it is, it needs to be, carefully concealed and designed. So, there's just a lot of folks who are afraid of, they don't even, pretty clear to me, they haven't really read the report, and they don't really understand what it is. So, they're just using it as a way to get leverage for whatever they want. I'm not sure what they want, but
sounds like agenda speak. George, the people that watch this show, it's not Enjoy Lake Forest. This is guys sitting at the bar, tipping one back and having a conversation. so people can consume this information and not yawn. Okay, so you do have to, liven things up.
I'm a very boring person. If you talk to Joe, he'll tell you my conversations at the bar are very similar to this.
That's true.
Well, I'm stepping in.
But this ain't NPR, George.
So George, people use the term an acronym CBD. Okay, when we talk about this, you know what it means. Joe knows what it means, but the guy in the street thinks it's weed. Okay, so we go talk.
Well, maybe that's something we can open in Lake Forest. We get CBD at CBD. That'll be the name, or the Lake Forest CBD, or we'll call it the Lake Forest Oasis. I don't know. We got a business idea here, George.
You can take that up with the current administration.
I don't believe that is a permissible use right now.
No, it's not. It's not. That was one of the shortest decisions I've ever seen made by the city council.
And a wise one, I think.
It took about a nanosecond to make that decision.
Yeah.
Well, again, we're calling it the CBD. People don't know what that means. Okay, there's probably, relative to 20,000 people in Lake Forest, there's probably a handful that knows what's going on. So we're trying to educate them. So the Central Business District, what is it? What does that encompass? Is it Market Square to City Hall? What is the area that takes care of?
It's basically starts at the south end. It starts on Vine, and at the north end, it really goes all the way up to Alden. But the core of it is the Market Square. Those four or five blocks around Market Square, and what they're calling the inner core, or the inner ring. It's I know a lot of people who refer to going uptown in Lake Forest.
Yes.
Or downtown, but back in the day when you said downtown, people thought you were talking about Chicago. So
that's exactly.
And they talk about the Chicago CBD all the time too. I mean, it's a well-known sort of real estate term of art, planning.
Maybe I said this, I think last week. Maybe they can have a contest to come up with a name for the area, and we had a couple ones like what was it, Market Square Circle, or
we did have. By the way, they did do a Settlers Square for the West Lake Forest one, which was this, and people do refer to that as Settlers Square. That was successful.
And interesting, the history. I mean, forgive me, but the history of that is that the first settlers in Lake Forest were there, not over by where we are now. Yeah. It was and that's why St. Patrick's Church is the first, really the first church in Lake Forest.
So the issue with the Central Business District is you have empty storefronts that the owners are netting more to have them not filled than filling them up. Is that the issue?
Well, they're just holding out for the perfect tenant.
So yes.
No, I mean, the perfect tenant's going to pay them more than the less perfect tenant.
So this, I just want to make sure I'm on to this. So the small businesses that could go in there can't afford the rents, right? So there has to be, is that most of them, unless you're a chain?
Well, there are different rents in different parts of town. So if you want to be right on Market Square, it's like, you want a house on the lake, or are you willing to be in, another neighborhood that's not as precious? And some retailers feel like they want their house right on Lake Michigan in Market Square, and they're willing to pay the price and able to pay the price. That's a risk, because the cost of that rent becomes a cost of their profit model, or an expense in their profit model. It means their sales have to be good. So it's a constant churn. Retailers try things, they move into places. I don't know that Williams-Sonoma knew that they were going to be as successful as they've been when they moved into that space, but they did it. They've been, it's one of their top stores in the country. Lululemon, same story. I didn't know if they were feeling like this town had enough people in it to power their business. What they found out was that there may not be as many people here, but they have big wallets. So, and
we have a couple Lululemon shoppers in my house. So
a lot of demand for yoga pants. Yeah, yoga pants everywhere, except on this podcast. This new retailer that's going into the old J. Crew space is taking a gamble.
It's tough because online shopping has really, affected a lot of retail elsewhere. I mean, cities that used to have great sales tax revenue from shopping are really scrambling. And we haven't had that hit because we're more reliant on the property tax, but it could affect. I mean, there's stores that could have gone into Market Square years ago that may not now because of online shopping, right?
Well, actually, it's the trend is going the other way now.
Really? Okay.
Online shopping has leveled off at a sort of I want to say something in the high teens in terms of total market share. And the online only retailers have found that the cost of acquiring customers strictly through online efforts is extremely high, much higher than having a storefront, and then integrating the storefront into their online business, where you can do order from the store and have it delivered to your house, buy online and return it to the store. That interface really is something the customer wants and is powering their sales. So the optimal model is to have a robust online capability integrated with your storefronts. And so actually retail storefronts are very precious right now. Retail occupancies nationwide, I think, are at record levels.
That's great. I mean, but you do see like these malls like Hawthorne, out in Vernon Hills.
Malls are a different situation entirely. Yeah.
Guys, getting back to the central business district, okay, what are the levers that you pull to get people to take the storefronts, have them pay the rents, or make it worthwhile to the landlord to take on a tenant, meaning TIFs, tax?
Yeah, well, we've used it, and I wouldn't say we're picking specific tenants so much as we're trying to achieve certain objectives with the outcome of the real estate. But Lake Forest has used a lot of different tools over the years. We've used TIFs on 2 occasions very successfully. It's interesting, at our going away dinner, the city staff put together a 30-year retrospective, which I hope they're going to post on the city website. I really do. It's really, really powerful. It just goes back and shows what Lake Forest looked like around 1990 versus what it looks like today. And, the West Side area, Settlers Square, clearly was a backwater. It was just not attractive at all. It's much, much better today. Downtown Lake Forest, we didn't have strong signage ordinances. We didn't have any kind of cohesion in our design recommendations and controls, and the downtown looked far inferior to what it looks like today, and it's visible in the pictures. And so the notion that this change is bad is really misguided. I mean, change has been very good for this city because we've managed it well. And we are living in a much, much nicer community than I moved into 35 years ago. And
obviously, this is way better than inner city Chicago. I love it. But it's
way better than Highland Park.
But what are the hold on? What are the issues that are going to come up? Because yes, as Joe says, the Flat Earth Society, whoever moved in, they want to be the last ones moving in. I get it. They don't want any changes, but what are the things that are going to pop up so we can get ahead of the curve and educate people what's going on? Okay.
Well,
parking's
one. We've got some issues with some buildings that are need to be redeveloped at some point. We don't know when. We don't control this real estate. The city doesn't own this stuff. We have to sort of guide. It's like bumpers at a bowling alley. That's kind of our level of specificity that we can control. The post office is a good example. There have been rumors over the years that the post office was going to relocate to a storefront. They tell us, we go to them probably once a year and ask about that. And in recent years, they've told us nothing's happening there because how they make their money these days is on bulk mail. And Lake Forest is a large outsized recipient of bulk mail because all the bulk mailers sending their catalogs and things want to have Lake Forest customers. So that actually is a functioning post office that I guess is covering its nut, according to the post office.
Yeah.
But, times change, and it's a beautiful building, and we would certainly want to preserve it, but it's an industrial building on the inside. And it doesn't have the amenities you would need to put in a restaurant or retail. And it'd be very costly to do that in such a historic building. So that's a case where in the future, if somebody came to us with a proposal to put a desirable, a use that the city desired in there, we might find some ways to help them out a little bit. We've done that.
But you did that with Lake Colonial, right? That was an old historic building.
Yes, slightly. As long as they achieve sales that are about double what the prior restaurant was generating, we rebate to them a small portion of their sales taxes.
And we let them have a blue awning.
Well, that's another story. That's how these processes can go awry.
Yeah, there was a classic one. We like green. They wanted blue. They got blue.
That private property owner spent $6 million to completely gut renovate one of the most historic structures in our community to make it viable for the next 100 years, whether or not they succeeded as a restaurant. It turned out to be very successful, but nobody was sure of that at the time. But they did go ahead and replace all the plumbing, all the electric, all the air conditioning, rebuilt the inside of the building to be functional for the modern day, redid the outside of the building. I mean, that's our old fire station.
Yeah,
that's
huge
our
project.
And I've been there for dinner with people, and they don't believe me when I tell them this used to be a fire station.
Oh, the whole what was the Market Club? The upstairs when you walked into the left is completely gone. The whole floor is gone.
Right.
But it turned out really nice. I mean, as you said, it's a property that's going to last.
If the price of that was that we were going to get double the sales taxes, and then after we got double the sales taxes, we would rebate a small portion of that for anything above that doubling, that seemed like a pretty fair, and it was important to them for the city to show our desire to have them here. And that was enough. And it's just a very small sort of token.
But each of these things is publicly deliberated, right? So it's
Absolutely.
not like it's going to be done in the back room, and they're going to sneak this in. One day you're going to see something bulldozed or something. Every one of these projects that could come to fruition as a result of the plan that the Plan Commission has now adopted, I assume now goes to the City Council.
Yep.
Every single thing is going to have the full public input and discussion on, and I suspect some things will go through, but some things might not, right? I mean,
the blue awning, down to the detail of what color is the awning on the Colonial. That's how the public discussion went. I mean, it's not.
I'm glad I wasn't in on that meeting.
Actually, I am glad that the Ohio State Pension Fund was willing to accept a blue awning.
Well, that's actually not their building.
Ah, okay, that's outside of their
Market Square.
That building and the old Marshall Field building are not actually part of the Market Square.
Oh, okay.
Assets that Ohio State Teachers owns. So,
guys, getting this back, parking, the HPC, is it the HPC or whatever the zoning that they want to keep these 100-year-old buildings up no matter what the cost. What is the third issue?
Well, I mentioned it before. How do we manage our way through hopefully replacing some of the buildings that don't fit? Mm-hmm. And some of them have arguable historic significance. Some of them don't.
Arguable.
I mean, you get into Howard Van Doren Shaw sneezed here, so we should save the building, stuff like that.
But a lot of them don't. And if we write the rules in such a way that nothing can change, that means you're also preserving all the things that we don't really want to preserve. So you can't paint with a broad brush. It's block by block, sort of site by site, and that's how these things get resolved. Somebody comes with a proposal on a particular site.
I often have asked, whether it's here or other communities, when there's controversy about redevelopment and change and stuff, and obviously it's human nature to resist change. But what's the year you want the city to be frozen in? Is there a specific year you want? Because we could go back in time, and I think some of the attitudes now would keep Market Square from being built.
Oh, the beach was hugely controversial. A lot of people didn't think the beach was a good idea.
Yeah, very expensive.
A lot of money at the time. It looked like now it looks like a pipsqueak investment, and what we've gotten for it is beyond belief. But
beautiful. That's
the kind of thing it's hard for people to see forward, and so just trust in the processes. Really, is my view. This town has very robust processes. Actually, they're so robust that I know a lot of people in the real estate business that won't come anywhere near here, which is a big problem. People complain that we only have a handful of people that are developing and operating in the city. Well, that's because we only have a handful of people that are willing to put up with, the gauntlet that we run them through.
Well,
and understand it well enough to work with it.
George, did Mr. T screw it up, and now you got these 17 standards? Okay, because he was cutting down buckthorn, or what? It's just the pendulum is starting to swing back. How do we loosen it up, grease this up a little bit? Because I don't know what you want to call them. The small fraction that makes 80% of the noise and slows things down, they keep pointing to this stuff. How do we correct that? Do we just stall things forever?
Well, I can't tell future city councils what to do.
Yeah, you can tell.
In the interest of full disclosure, I was on the committee that created the HPC, and I was involved in creating, and we didn't create the 17 standards. We found standards from other sort of best in class communities, and we adopted them. In retrospect, I should have realized, I think we as a committee should have realized that if there are 17 standards,
yeah,
any project, there's going to have 2 or 3 of them that you can use to block the project. And so I do think there probably needs to be a look at maybe consolidating those 17 standards into something that's a little more manageable.
No, George, there going to be pickets outside your house?
I didn't say eliminate the standards. I said consolidate them and eliminate duplications. I think there's a fair amount of redundancy in the standards. So that's just me, though, as a private citizen, having lived with it. With the results of my own work.
Didn't it almost kill the Veterans Memorial? Even they were like trying to. I guess they abstained on it.
There's been a tendency to, as I say, design from the Dayus, and that never works. And so, they really need to, and that's true of all the boards and commissions, and they get instructed on this when people join them. Your job on a board or commission is to respond to proposals that are put in front of you. If it's a non-starter, you can say this is a non-starter. If you could say this is good with some modifications in this direction. But when you're telling them what color to paint something or how many stripes to have on their window moldings, or how many columns they should have on the front of the building, that's outside. That's now you're doing the architect's work, and that shouldn't be done by a committee. I can show you some places around town where effectively that's what happened, and it did not come out well.
Yeah. So George, we're getting close to the end. How are you on time? Are you a hard stop?
I got all day.
Oh, all right.
Are you retired from your work too, or are you just retired?
Yes, I'm starting to do a few things again, but yeah, I retired from my career in July of 2021 and spent the last 2 years just basically.
Hey, you could be a co-host of the podcast.
I look forward to joining you December 31. Yeah.
Oh, good. Ooh. Congratulations.
I got a long way to go.
Nice.
I'm counting the months.
We need more chefs in this kitchen. So George, part of what we want to do is educate the people that are listening, because occasionally something funny happens on the show. To be a mayor, you get paid $10. Do you just run for mayor? Like, what is the process? We had 1,400 families move in, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to join the newcomers club, or I'm going to join the caucus. What's the process?
Well, really, the caucus drives the process. In my case, my first job, quote unquote, with the city was I went on the zoning board as just a board member in 1993. I filled out a little card. They did an open call. Card came in the mail. It said, "Would you be interested in helping out?" I filled out the card. They interviewed me, and 3 years later, they asked me if I'd be interested in being on the zoning board. And from there, I became chairman of the zoning board, then chairman of the plan commission. Did a bunch of ad hoc committees like the HPC one that I mentioned before. Then I was out of the city government for 5 years, from 2005 to 2010. And then I was drafted to come back and lead the restructuring board for the Gorton Center, and because they had essentially gone bankrupt, and there was a question of whether we were going to keep Gorton, and so led that group for I think about 9 months, something like that, and then turned it over to a permanent board, and they've just done extraordinary work. They now have a multi-million-dollar endowment, which they had a $0 endowment back beforehand, and great programming. So that's been good. And then that sort of brought me back into the public light, and I was asked to become an alderman, and then I was chairman of the finance committee when I was an alderman for 6 years. So dealt with all the pension issues and difficult city finances at that time because the state was so unreliable. Anyway, we've built a wall, we built a moat around ourselves financially over the years. And then 2019, the caucus asked me if I'd consider running for mayor. I had told them that I was not interested in prior years because of my career, but I thought, well, the circumstances were such that they kind of said, would you please do it this time? We really would like you to do this. And I said, okay.
So it's volunteer.
That's the process I experienced.
So it's volunteers, trying to find volunteers, because we're complaining about, let's just say HPC. Okay. My experience, because I'm a nerd. I watch all the shows that the city puts on. I enjoy Lake Forest. I enjoy Lake Forest. And the HPC comes on, and my opinion is you can clearly see where an agenda is going. Subjective things come into play, and it depends on the people that get elected to go on these boards. So we have to recruit, find volunteers, have more people to choose from. It is what it is. Now, the question that I have is, do you think it's getting harder to find people to volunteer? Do you think we need, in your opinion, okay, there's 43 people, I think, nine in each, something like that, 43 on the caucus. If it's that hard to find people that want to volunteer, do you think it makes sense to reduce the amount of people on the caucus, or is this one of those no comments?
The caucus is its own entity, and they make their own, they have their own view of what they need and should be. I know they've recognized openly that there were some gaps in their bylaws that have been exploited by certain people to the caucus's detriment. So I believe they're high on their agenda to do something about some of those gaps and loopholes. I think it takes if you want to have visibility toward a good large pool of volunteers, it takes a lot of people. Because it's all basically who knows who. It also benefits the caucus when they have a balance of longer term residents and newer residents, because we want new people coming into the city government all the time. We need that. But also, you want some gray hair and some experience and some people who know their way around town. So that's all. With respect, one of the things that I think is an easy trap to fall into is selecting people for boards and commissions almost strictly based on their personal areas of expertise. So, for example, on the building review board, should they all be architects? I don't think so, because there's first of all, there's levels of professional courtesy that sometimes inhibit the free flow of discussion in that circumstance. And also, we want people on the boards and commissions that represent the interests of the whole community. And so it's not just your architect, and having an architect or two on there is probably good. Having a complete, and I'm not saying this is the case with the building review board. In fact, it's not. But if it was all architects and designers, I think that would be a problem. And I think there's been a tendency or a trap that's been, that people have fallen into. And I bear some responsibility for this. The mayor nominates these people. The caucus surfaces them, the mayor nominates them, and the council approves them. So, the mayor is a big part of this. However, I will say the mayor is somewhat beholden, or not beholden, but somewhat at the mercy of the talent that the caucus presents to the mayor, because the mayor doesn't know everybody in town.
Right. And you approve the people that come on board. I believe when people say the mayor really doesn't have power, that's bullcrap. You can, if you wanted to, you can reject all the people and only accept the people that you would want, right?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. True.
It's so hard to find volunteers. Does someone came up with the number of 9 for each ward, assuming the same population is in each ward? My point is, if you can't get people to show up to meetings, do you reduce the amount of people that you need to represent? Because if only half are passionate, then reduce the number to 4 to 5 in each. It's just,
honestly, I don't know how that number came to be, and I don't know that it's sacrosanct.
Yeah.
I do know that there are 9 people in this whole community who are elected by the caucus members are elected as well by the people in their ward, but there's only 9 people in the whole city, and in the school board, but there are 9 people in the city government that are elected by their resident, by their neighbors.
But every Lake Forest resident is or every registered voter, I believe is the rule in Lake Forest, is a member of the caucus, right? Because I got a postcard a few months ago listing candidates in my ward for caucus committee, and it was a contested thing in my ward. So
typically they say, pick 2 out of 3 or 2 out of 4, and they're almost always like that, and some people don't make it. But my point was going to be that there are only 9 elected officials in the city government, and so ultimately those are the people who really truly represent the community. They all serve at large. They don't serve, except when it comes to delivery of service. The aldermen don't serve, quote unquote, their 4th ward constituents or their 1st ward constituents. They serve at large. They serve the entire community, without regard to ward boundaries. Their job is to solicit input from their ward and to kind of report to the council what the people in their ward seem to be saying. But this is not like the U.S. Congress, where you represent your district.
And I don't think we want to go that direction, do we?
Yeah, no.
Well, in order to correct some of the problems that are going on, look, I hate pointing fingers without offering a solution, a good one or bad one, okay? Because I just want to see forward progress. If we don't have more people volunteering, then the selection pool becomes smaller and we accept bad breath when we should be taking no breath. And we get people that come on and we run into these issues and something needs to be addressed. Now, the caucus, there isn't any, the only oversight that I see of it is the power of you rejecting the people that they put into place.
Well, they can choose not to renominate somebody.
Yeah.
And part of their mission is to monitor the behavior and performance of people on the boards and commissions, and frankly, the city council, because their endorsement, the endorsement of the caucus is pretty much definitive in most of these cases. So especially for the elected offices, unless there's opposition. So.
And not only is the mayor term limited and the alderman term limited, aren't all the commissions term limited as well?
Yep, all the boards and commissions are term limited, and again, all volunteers. So, and that serves to protect us against the entrenchment of special interests.
And then the flip side of that, Mayor George, is you have all the people that know what's going on leaving, and you have the newcomers club coming in that doesn't know anything. And we've talked about it. This is what happens in politics.
That's the flip side of term limits. I mean, that's
that's the age-old debate.
Right.
What's better, experience or new blood? And I think the one thing most people would agree on is that having something called a political class is, that of permanently entrenched politicians in our government, in any part of our government, is really anathema to our Constitution in the way it was created, and that's just my pet peeve. I'm speaking personally at this point, but
it has developed just the same, though.
But is
the
there
fact
a
that we
role?
have something called a political class in this country, the founders would be spinning in their graves.
Is there a role, George, for you've served? I mean, 30 plus years. I mean, even if you weren't mayor, your record of service is amazing to the city over the years, and thank you for all of that. But is there a role for someone like you as a former mayor to maybe be of wise counsel?
There's always been an informal. There's always been an informal sort of. The former mayors stick together and provide some input from time to time on important matters. Absolutely.
Can that advisory board be public? I mean, to hear what you guys are debating, because you guys know everything. Because what I hear is you guys are getting together, sharing information, and we're back here. People think the worst. Oh, you're hiding information. Is there a way to have some type of advisory board that comes up and says, "Hey, what do you guys think?" And then you I don't want to say pontificate, but you give your thoughts on it, and the public can hear. Because eventually, the referendum, I know that's a whole nother issue, but it would be interesting for somebody who's been here since '89 that's seen a lot of things going on, giving us the Benjamin Franklin list, the pluses and minuses of how you see it, versus getting the marketing things in the damn mailbox that says, okay, here's why you should vote for it.
Yeah, I'm glad it passed. Personally, I think it was a good thing to do. It's our probably second most historic building in the whole community after Market Square. And unfortunately, sort of like the library, it's been allowed to deteriorate to a point where it was going to be very expensive to do the renovations, and they weren't going to be sexy and visible to people. It's all infrastructure, and I'm sure there are great learning benefits to it, but there also is just, historic preservation benefits to it. So I'm glad that it passed. I was a little surprised. It was not run like the last big referendum that they did. It was a very different initiative from the school board and the superintendent. It was done very differently. And I'm not going to question it. Worked. They got it passed, but
by the narrowest of margins.
I was a little surprised at how narrow the margin was.
125, and with a couple twists, probably from this podcast. I don't want to go there. That's not the reason why I bring it up, Mayor George. But
moral of the story is
has buyer's remorse.
But I will say that the city and the city does work closely with District 115 and District 67, but they're very different. They're separate taxing bodies. I mean, the thing I like to point out to people is school district, 115 doesn't even have to follow our zoning codes. I mean, Illinois gives them great independence from city government, and we do work together on a cooperative basis, but the city was not involved in any meaningful way in the referendum.
But the caucus does get involved in the school board slating too, right? They have some arrangement with the Lake Bluff caucus. I think I read somewhere. Well,
I think they split. They agree to have. I think the agreement is that they're 2 members from Lake Bluff and 5 from Lake Forest or something. It's reasonably by population, as I understand it. It's not something I've never really gotten involved in this agreement. Sorry,
I brought up the school guys was it would be nice to have some type of public forum, even if it's the ex-mayor club coming on, and to be able to talk about these issues so people can say, oh, okay, I get it. That's why this is how I look at it versus, behind the scenes. Maybe that's not possible, but
be a great chamber breakfast, Mr. Lesser.
Yes, it would. That would be the ex-mayors panel. Would be
or it could be like the Saturday Night Live skit. Remember the ex-presidents?
Yes, exactly. They have like a clubhouse. They all hang out together.
I will say, not unlike our U.S. presidents, there is an expectation of deference to the current mayor who was elected.
That's true. You don't want to be having somebody second guess everything you do.
Right.
Well, second guess, it's just offering it input, because
look, they want that input to be private.
Hold on, guys. George, you won an election by, I think, 1,800 votes out of city of 20,000.
Nobody voted against me.
But
100%.
Landslide George.
No, but the amount of voters that are available and actually vote that give a crap to go do it is very small. We have to get more people involved. In order to get them involved, they have to consume the information. And I'm throwing out, this word transparency, the way new government is being done, I point to the treasurer of Lake County. What's her name, Joe?
Holly Kim.
All right. That's how I think. She's a Democrat. I would vote for her. Okay.
Yeah.
Every question asked and answered. Asked her to come on. Sure, no problem. You got any stipulations? No, I'm an open book. I don't know. The old guard is hiding the information. The new guard is giving it out there and letting people know what's going on.
Well, I think if you watch the city council meetings, if you pay attention to the boards and commissions, if you go to our city website, I would tell you, spend an hour on the city website and then go spend an hour on the county website and tell me which one you understand better when you're done. There's no comparison.
Yeah, for every Holly Kim at Lake County, there's other ones that aren't nearly as transparent as Holly.
My point is nobody's watching it, Mayor George. So all the information is there. People are lazy. They won't even go to vote. So there has to be some type of mechanism to get that information out there. If it's in 1 minute chunks, 30-second chunks, that's what I'm trying to do.
YouTube videos.
Yep. Right.
I mean, you're a YouTube star. You became a YouTube star.
We've made massive improvements in the whole outreach and communication area, and there's a lot more to come. Hopefully all 4 of you or all 3 of you have the LF Now iPhone app.
I do.
Which is fabulous.
Every pop.
Beach parking. We love it for the beach parking checking.
Right. That's actually driven a lot of downloads. You should be on the city's Friday email blast, which all you have to do is on the front page of the city's website, just sign up, give them your email address.
But people are consuming information.
One thing that we've talked about a lot on here is George is the lack of media as compared to the
good
past.
Point.
I mean, we used to have 2 newspapers in town.
Yeah.
We used to have regular coverage, and now we have none. The Tribune's Lake Forester rarely has a story about Lake Forest in it. More stories about Mundelein than there are about Lake Forest. This podcast is one of the few means where an average person can listen to and learn something about the city and current events. We are like the new media, and it's been difficult.
Yeah, it's a weakness that and the alternative is, unfortunately, a lot of people are getting their information from sources that really don't know anything, who are spouting
like us.
who are spouting things on Facebook and Instagram that are just wrong, and and getting all wound up about falsehoods, things that, did you know that they're going to tear down Market Square next week? Oh no, and then all of a sudden you get 5,000 responses until somebody says, where did you get that from? There's no point.
Well, a great example was yesterday with the whole Bears stadium business. For 6 hours, we all thought the Bears were going to build the stadium in Lake Forest, and that all turned out to be hogwash.
Complete miscommunication.
Where would
Ella Farm? They were going to knock down Ella Farm and build.
That was one of the silliest things. Where would you put it?
I'm glad, Kevin. I'm glad the Bears spokesperson clarified that he I think it was basically, he said he was giving a speech somewhere, and he said, I got a call from Lake Forest, but he meant their office at Hallis Hall in Lake Forest called him.
Yeah.
And I think it's now come out what the community was that actually was, and I forget it.
Was it Aurora?
Aurora, yeah, Richard Irvin, who I know when he ran for governor. But I mean, that's
the candidate, by the way.
I kind of joked, though. I've joked with you guys in a text message that I think when that news hit, our friends at the Flat Earth Society had an emergency meeting. They were organizing to stop the Bears Stadium from being built in Lake Forest. That's how reactive people can get to some of this stuff.
Yes, you can.
It's gotten one of the things we've seen in national politics, and unfortunately, it's rearing its head here in Lake Forest, is when you have people who don't succeed at the ballot box, or don't succeed in getting what they want in some other venue, they turn around and seek to delegitimize the institution so that they can try to get control in some other way, sort of extrajudicial or extra, democratic way. And it's just a factor of our current way of life. It's very difficult, but we just have to all learn to deal with it.
Do you think that scares a lot of people out of the process? That Pete talked a lot about the lack of people wanting to be involved, that they just shy away from the controversy.
No question. The caucus will tell you that right off. They'll say, hey, one of the reasons why we have trouble recruiting people for boards and commissions is they watch a few of the meetings and they see some of the things that go on, and especially in these more controversial issues, and they just don't want any part of it. They don't want to spend their private, personal, volunteer time that way.
I had to have when we had a teacher's strike when I was on the school board, we had to have police cars in front of all the school board members' houses. It got that
right.
Nasty.
So, it's infecting some institutions that are that historically have been very constructive in town, and we have preservation groups here in town that have been very positive forces in the community for a long time, and now they're actually spending their donor money on legal costs to fight with the city. I mean, I don't think their donors. This is donated for the purpose of historic.
Yeah, I mean, that's a topic we really haven't touched on, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's something I've heard.
Legal fees are the highest and best use of money.
If you hire Rick Lesser. But yeah, I mean, that's something you hit it right on the head, George, and we've been trying to get some more information on that. And I understand when it's litigation, people can't comment on litigation, but the fact of the matter is there is that lawsuit in there, and
it's all these same people.
Now they're taking the foundation.
I don't want the Westminster. It's all the same people. And
Lock the box. Yeah.
People. And
Flat Earth Society, but they've upped the game, and now they've enjoined in this lawsuit. So there's money going to this foundation, right? That's a private foundation that I think people gave, not thinking it was going to be used for this, right? I mean, that's because we all want to preserve. This town has a wonderful history and a lot of great things around town that have been preserved, and no one wants to get rid of that. And it's a delicate balance of, the phrase I like to use is you should be proud of your past but focused on the future, that these things live and grow, to use them. But it's really the whole thing about that foundation enjoining the lawsuit, I think has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, in my opinion.
Well, and then, they had a representative get up in front of the Plan Commission and say, well, we don't want 5-story buildings like Highland Park has. Our zoning code is 3 stories max in the downtown, in the core, only in the core, and that's 35 feet. So, they're
rooftop decks. I don't want light. I don't want anybody to have fun.
We already have all that. We don't want outdoor music speakers at restaurants.
Really,
we could have had rooftop decks for the Bears stadium, right? Yeah.
4 years ago,
like
the big complaint was we need a more vibrant downtown. 4 years on, we've had a little bit of success at improving that factor, and everybody's upset about various aspects of it. So none of which have done anything, in my opinion, but improve the quality of life of the residents of Lake Forest.
That goes without saying, George. George, over these past few years since we've been buds, what's one of the things that I've gotten wrong that you're like, that guy? You open up your Saturday morning email and you're like, that idiot.
Oh, where do I start?
Don't be shy, George.
I said pick one.
Long list.
For our next half hour.
No, just pick one.
I tend to forget these things pretty quickly. So there certainly have been those instances. I can't really come up with a zinger for you right here.
I think the shopping cart kind of we have to see some of the emails.
I knew that the city had nothing to do with that.
But the person on the street thought it, including
they believed it. They believed it because you said it.
No, they believed.
So what do you? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go, Pete. Go ahead.
Who told you that, Pete?
Suzanne over at Jules.
Okay. Well.
And then I called up Kathy, who always picks up the phone.
Yeah.
On the first ring, I said, hey, what's going on? And she said, well, maybe something happened in the 90s. Not sure. Okay. Looked, told me, hey, nothing's there. I call up Suzanne. Suzanne, what's up? Call up your bosses. And here's a petition, by the way. And we got the shopping cart.
Yeah, good for you.
Okay, good for me. Damn straight.
Yeah. But it started with an incorrect statement.
But it got corrected, and the thing got resolved.
Fixed the problem, right? So that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem is we do long form content, and people only want 30 seconds now. So things get lost in context. So you have to figure out what you can put out to tease them to want to learn more. That's the issue. George, hey man, you went overtime with us. It's been a long time coming. Thank you for coming on. And please don't be a stranger, man. This is good. This is good stuff. Good eating.
I'll try to maintain my sense of perspective.
And if we get it wrong, you got our phone numbers.
Yeah, I'll come back on and correct it.
Yeah,
maybe that's.
We love it.
I don't want to give you the incentive to get things wrong, but
Hey, we need to get something wrong so we can get George back on here.
Well, people have said I've gotten it 90% right. So at 10% I'm trying to correct. The only way you can do that is by bringing people on, and I have no problem people calling me an idiot. Sometimes it's my second middle name. Mayor George Pandaleon, thank you so much for coming on the Lake Forest.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's you're providing a positive thing for the community most of the time.
Most of the time.
and it's a good thing. So thanks very much.
And again, thanks for all you do. Rick and I have served on public boards, but I don't think anywhere near the amount of time you've put in over the years, not just as mayor, but alderman and all the commissions and all the other roles you've had.
Yes.
Wow. I mean,
it's been a very positive experience with a couple of bumps along the way. So
yeah, and I know that takes time away from your family and your work. So enjoy that time you got now. I got to meet your wife at the city council, at your last city council meeting. Very nice lady, and great that you're getting some more time, well-deserved time with your family now.
Thank you. It's been a great ride.
Mayor George, take care.
Thank you.
The Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course, Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters: Matt A., Elizabeth C., Costa, Lance, Otto, RDM, John C., and Helen. Shout out to the Lake Forest Breakfast Group, Broad Stop and Captain Mike's in Kenosha, the Greentown Tavern, and the Frolic Lounge in Waukegan.